got to tell you, I've known Tim for quite a little while, most on Facebook, never met him in person, but he introduces himself better than anybody else does because he tells his story in such a way, it just compels you to want to listen to him. But he started about 10 years ago with fat, sick, and nearly dead, and decided to juice because he was in a place in his life that he was not healthy and knew it. There he moved to a plant-based diet. And for 10 years now, he and his wife, Heather, have spent their lives and their time inspiring others to do just the same. I'm going to let him tell you exactly what he did and how he did it. If you're on Facebook, check him out on Facebook. They always have something going on Facebook. And you still do the every Sunday night Facebook Live, right?
We try, yeah.
Most Sunday nights.
Some Sunday nights.
On there. They post on there when they're there. So Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you and welcome again.
All right. Thank you for having me back. Thank you, Vicki, and the whole crew there. Thank you for the work that you guys do. It's so important because if we don't get this message out, I don't know who's going to, because broccoli companies just don't have the money to advertise, right? So first of all, I apologize. I'm just trying to kick a cold here in my throat. I'm a high school teacher, so I've been kind of yelling at kids all day. So I have a little bit of my voice left, and hopefully I'll get through this. All right, thank you. And by all means, if you have questions, load them up in the chat. I'm going to try to save a bunch of time at the end for Q&A. And if my voice goes out short, we'll have a long time for Q&A to give my voice breaks. But hello and welcome everyone. I am Tim Kaufman. I have had the really unique opportunity to share my story all over the place with some really cool people. And I've got to see a bunch of different things. Actually, I had a very private life, a very quiet life in Alden, New York, which is just outside of Buffalo. And I've had the crazy opportunity to be on shows like Good Morning America, The Today Show. I've had my story published in WebMD, and it's been a crazy ride to say the least. But the truth is, I share my story 10 years later, not because I like being in the spotlight, because frankly, I've had enough of it. I share it because I know what happened to me is out there for anyone, and it's just a choice. In fact, the first time the news ever quoted me, our local news here, they taglined my segment as "I'm just a fat guy that ate some apples." And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have been racing around all day to get home from work to do this. So that's why I'm here, because I know that this lifestyle is out there for anyone. There's no excuse. It fits everyone. This is how I believe we should all eat, and this is the most optimal way to health. So I'm going to take you for a really quick walk through my story. I'm going to start way, way, way back when I was in high school. This is me. I had a wonderful mullet going on. This nice young lady next to me would end up, my high school sweetheart would end up marrying me after high school. And we are going to be celebrating our 30-year wedding anniversary this August. So we did get married a little young, so I'm not quite that old. I'm not even 50 yet, but I'm going to be 50 soon. So like I said, I grew up in Alden, farming community, worked really, really hard on the farm, wasn't too crazy about school, so I knew I had to work really hard. But as I worked this manual labor, lifting stuff and stretching and lifting, I kept getting hurt all the time. I kept twisting my ankles and kind of popping my knee out. My wrists would get kind of wonky and didn't think much of it, just thought I was a klutz. Until I got another job, as Heather and I got married, I moved into a factory setting where I did manual labor over my head, which would involve more of my shoulders. And about a month or two after I started doing that, my left shoulder started dislocating. And it started getting so bad through the weeks that it would dislocate just from the pressure of me sneezing. So I went to the doctor. I said, "Can you look at this? Tell me what's wrong with it." They took some tests and they said that they had to kind of shrink up the shoulder capsule. But basically, they were going to cut the shoulder through my back, take some of the tendons and ligaments, kind of pick them up, fold them over each other, stitch them up to kind of tighten everything up. When they got in there, they realized that things were way too stretchy. And I was diagnosed with this disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And basically, it's a genetic screw up that makes all my joints kind of like bubble gum. The collagen in my body is not like everyone else's. So when I'm young, not so much of a big deal, but as I get older, every one of these dislocations, every one of these twisted ankles would result in a little divot kind of on the cartilage. And by the time I was 25, I was loaded with osteoarthritis from all the bone damage. And then eventually, not too long after that, I would end up with bone on bone on most of my joints. Obviously, that came with some chronic pain. And the prognosis that the doctor had for me is by the time I was 25, I would likely be in a wheelchair because my knees would no longer be able to hold me up. Along with the chronic pain, when I left the hospital, I was prescribed some painkillers, kind of like the standard painkillers they give you after surgery. And I started taking these painkillers, and they worked really well. I had never really took medicine before. I think I was in chronic pain for so long, I didn't even realize that I was in chronic pain until I got a little bit of relief from it. These painkillers were prescribed to me kind of as much as I wanted. And so I just continued to take them. And as you know, over time, these painkillers become less and less effective. So we would up the dosage more and more until we would get to the end of the dosage. And then we would go on to a different type of painkiller. So I went from like Lortab to Percocet and then to Oxys. And I was still in a ton of pain. And this is throughout the years. This is probably maybe 5 or 6 years span in between here. And my doctor said that he wanted to try a new medicine, a new pain medicine for me called fentanyl. Now, back then, I had never heard of the word fentanyl. It wasn't in the news every night. It wasn't killing 106,000 people a year. But this is a very bad drug if you didn't know it. This happened to be a duragesic patch, which is a transdermal system. So what was supposed to be good about the fentanyl is I had a constant supply going into my blood. Along with that, I would take what they call breakthrough painkillers, or as they say, stay ahead of the pain. So I was still taking all the tablets plus the fentanyl. Fentanyl basically did the same thing. It was super, super effective until it wasn't. Same kind of process. We would up the dosage until I hit the max dosage on fentanyl. I won't get into everything, but if you would have asked me if I was an addict, I probably could have looked you in the eyes and said no. But the truth was I was doing things I'm not so proud of to kind of play the system to get more and more of this medicine. I had been kind of had insomnia. It's kind of weird. You think these pills like make you really sleepy, and they kind of do, but you can't ever get to sleep. And so it had been about 5 nights of not sleeping. I was miserable. I was a wreck. I didn't feel like myself. So I stopped on the way home from work, and I picked up a 1.75 liter of vodka. And that night, I put a handful of pills in my hand, tossed them in my mouth, and I chased it down with an entire liter of vodka. And unfortunately, this wouldn't be just like a binge. This became my new routine. I would take as many pills as I could get, stay on the fentanyl, and I would drink about a liter of vodka every night before I went to bed. Along with these three things that I think started like legit trying to get out of physical pain, at some point they switched into getting me to escape emotional pain. I hated who I'd become. I hated that this stuff controlled my life. And probably this is kind of embarrassing to talk about, but the other escape that I just loved was processed food and fast food. And I think what really drew me to it is I could get it anywhere. I didn't have to like con prescriptions. I didn't have to pay cash for one. Like it was everywhere. In fact, on my ride to work, one time I wrote a blog, I counted there's 61 places I could stop and get fast food on my way to work. So fast food became about a 4, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 times a day, every single day, like clockwork. And I would get all the same feelings. I would get really excited as I sat in the drive-through. I would eat the food. I'd feel great for a few minutes, and then I'd crumple up the papers and I'd kind of feel guilty. Like, what was I doing to myself? But in any event, these 4 things became really my focus in life. And all I cared about was escaping reality. I would do as little as I could just to get by. And to say my life was spiraling out of control is an understatement. By the time I was 38 years old, I had weighed over 400. My doctor says well over 400. We'll never know because he literally couldn't weigh me. You can tell in my eyes, I wasn't happy. I had lost my love for life. I think there were nights that I went to bed that I didn't know if I was going to wake up. My kidneys were shutting down. I was on almost 20 prescription drugs a month, and I was a mess. And as I got into this selfish world of addiction and inactivity, the kind of brakes were put on because my wife's mom, who was like a second mom to me because we were so young when we started going out, she had been kind of cold, sick, flu kind of thing, went to the doctor. They did some blood work, and she was diagnosed with leukemia. And we got thrown into this world in this cancer hospital like overnight, and life all became about who's going to stay with her, who's going to come home and get the kids where they need to go. And while we're dealing with that, my father, we thought he had pneumonia, and he went to get a chest x-ray. And when the x-ray came back, they called a meeting with the family, and my father was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer that had metastasized through his whole body. My father was my best friend in the whole world. We did everything together. I mean, we did everything. Anything I knew, my dad taught me. We were best buddies. And just like that, the doctors gave him 6 months to live. My father didn't make it 6 months. He made it 6 weeks rather to the day. And he lost his battle with cancer. And shortly after that, Heather's mom lost her battle with leukemia that would eventually turn into lymphoma. And then that would result in a brain tumor. And she lost a hard fought battle with cancer. And she clung on for every single day she could hang on to be with her family. And that just spun my world around. 2 of my favorite people in the entire universe were just snuffed away way too early. And we tried to get things back to normal, if that's ever a thing. We tried to get some routine back. And one day, I don't know what made this day particular. I think about it all the time, and I can't tell you why this day was different than any other day, but I sat down on a chair and I brought my socks to Heather, and Heather had to put my socks on me so I could get ready to go to work. And she pulled up my sock and she just patted the side of my leg and she said, "You're all set." And something inside me clicked that I was the next funeral. We had no intention of planning funerals, and we just did 2 in a row. And I knew that she was going to have to go through all these same things, but for me. And when that funeral was done, she'd have to raise 2 young kids by herself. And I knew I had to do something. I just didn't really know what it was, but I knew I wasn't going to make it through another year. So in reality, I just wanted to get space in between these funerals. I went online, I found this thing called bariatric surgery. I thought, this is my magic pill here. I'm going to go. I got all the paperwork done. When I got into my doctor's office so he could sign the papers for surgery, he denied me the surgery because my blood pressure was 255 over 115. That was on a calcium channel blocker and a beta blocker. My pulse was 125 laying on the table. And he said with all the narcotics, he didn't know how I would react to the anesthesia. I went home that night thinking that he killed me. Like, this is not my fault. I did what I tried to do something. But something inside me after watching, especially Heather's mom trying to just live one more day for her family, I figure I owed it to her to at least try. So I did, I think, what a lot of people do. I went on a diet because that was the thing. And at the time, Atkins was the diet to go on. And when I looked at it, I'm like, I can do this. I can just live on chicken wings and cheese, which is basically what I was living on anyways. And along with the change in the diet, I have a picture of a chair to remind me that I used to sit in my office chair. I'd stand up to leave the room and I'd sit back down and stand up again. And it doesn't sound like much, but that was actually the beginning of me working out. I was technically doing twice as much work as I had done the day before. I lost some weight. I probably shed 40 pounds on keto or Atkins, but I still felt terrible. I sat down to watch Netflix one night, and this film called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead came up. In fact, it was just 10 years ago and a couple days, 11 days, 12 days. So I'm 10 years into this. I watched this film. I had no idea what I was watching. I just knew whatever Joe Cross did worked for him, and I wanted what he had. And so I had to start learning how to buy produce. And the first 3 days of the juice fast were terrible. By the fifth day, I had woken up in the same exact place that I went to sleep in. And to me, that was a miracle. That was all I wanted. I hadn't done that in years and years. I was constantly up all night, tossing and turning. But I got my first good night's sleep just 5 days into this juice fast. Because I watched this, another film came up in my suggestions for Netflix, a film called Forks Over Knives. And if you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage you to watch it. But this film showed me more of the science of why this works. And it showed me that instead of juicing, I could just eat these things I was juicing along with some whole grains and legumes. And I was frustrated after I saw this because I had just buried, like I say, my two favorite people from cancer. And here Dr. Campbell is turning on and off cancer cells with milk protein. And I didn't understand why no one had ever shared this. No one ever talked about diet through both of the sicknesses of both parents. And then because I watched that, a whole bunch of other things went, and I kind of got on these breadcrumbs of the science. But all while I was really getting immersed into the science, things started making sense, like everyday things. Like, why can the birds come up to my bird feeder and no one's telling them that they have to go on a diet? No one's portioning their food, but I don't have any birds that can't take off in the backyard because they ate too much bird seed. I live right across the street from 600 acres of cornfields. The deer eat all day, every day, and I've never seen an obese deer. Same with the fish. They have all sort of fish to eat, and yet I've never seen a fish with cankles. So it occurred to me that maybe it wasn't the amount of food I was eating. I was just not eating the food that was designed for humans. Along with that, people said no meat. Of course, no one ever cared what I ate when I was 400 pounds, but now everyone's crazy because you need meat for protein. Well, it made sense to me that some of the biggest, strongest mammals on the planet don't eat meat. And the milk thing, I grew up on a dairy farm, and especially me with my condition, right? I gotta really focus on strong bones, and we get that from calcium, which comes from dairy, or so I'd been told. But the truth is, when you think about it, the highest consuming dairy nations also have the highest incidence of osteoporosis. A flag should go up right there. Countries that don't consume a lot of dairy have really good bones and very minimal hip fractures. And then not only that, I never thought about why we drink milk. I mean, if I go in my backyard, I have an orchard back there. I grab a peach or an apple. I kind of clean it off on my pants, take a bite of it. Not weird at all. I'm in my backyard, no technology, no tools, and I'm just eating right on nature. But if I wanted a drink of milk with no technology and no tools, it would look like this. And I'm pretty sure my neighbors would call the cops on me. So, along with all these food changes that are happening, my movement started changing. The more I ate like this, the better I felt. And then one day, Heather popped the question. She said, "Do you want to go for a walk?" And of course, I responded, "Why would you walk when we have a car in the driveway?" But this is a picture of my first walk I ever did on purpose. I never just walked to walk, but this Heather convinced me to go. We were supposed to walk about 3/4 of a mile, turn around and come back. I couldn't make it even to the 3/4 of a mile. I sat down on this rock because I just couldn't go anymore. It took me almost an hour to get here. I was in severe pain. I thought I was going to end up in the hospital. My kids were able to capture this very happy moment for me. And so Heather and the kids went and got the car and picked me up, took me home where I iced my knees for a couple days. Something inside me wanted to go back and finish that walk. I think I was angry that I couldn't finish it because I really thought I would. I went back a few days later. I finished that walk, and I would go on to start walking every weekend. I love the outdoors, so I'd find trails to walk on, which they specifically told me not to walk on uneven ground. But I just fell in love with hiking trails. I would come back and get my family, tell them every place I'd been, and I'd take them with me. And it was so cool to start taking part in family activities again. They always just left me because I couldn't do anything. And it was so nice to start being a better dad and a better husband. My cousin stopped over and he showed me a picture from the summit of a high peak in the Adirondacks. And I said, "That is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." And he said one line to me that probably changed my life forever. He said, the picture doesn't do it justice. You have to see it with your own eyes. So I went to my doctor, the same one that denied me the surgery. And I said, "Doc, I'm going to be climbing a mountain next year. So you got to get me out of these knee immobilizers." I was in these things that would lock my knees out so my knees wouldn't bend anymore. And I said, "I'm going to be climbing, so I got to be able to bend my knees." And instead of saying no, he said, "We're going to send you to get braces made." So I got my legs casted. I got some fancy braces made, and I started walking upstairs. And I could only do 3 or 4 stairs the first time. But every day I'd go back and I'd do a couple more stairs, and 10 stairs turned into 20, turned into hundreds, and then hours. And within a year from seeing that picture, I was able to summit my first high peak, Big Slide Mountain. And in the back, I was very self-conscious about this brace. So I kind of hit it with my good leg, but I still have one of my braces on there. And it was one of the coolest days of my life. From there, we would just fall in love with Lake Placid. And to this day, we spend as much time as we can up there. I started getting the more anti-inflammatory foods I would eat. I see this looking back now. It wasn't apparent at the time, but the diet was actually flushing all the inflammation away from my joints. It's a genetic condition, so I can't get rid of it, but it was taking the symptoms and cutting them down like 90%. At the same time, with all the activity I was doing, I was getting really strong. and my muscles were actually taking over where my joints were failing. I just showed you a little sneak of that. This is probably my favorite picture of the entire presentation. I'm going to actually start crying. I've never done this before. I came home one day and just like Heather asked me to go for a walk, I said, hey, do you want to run a 5K with me? And she was, a 5K, isn't it like a marathon? And I'm like, I don't know how long it is, but they're having one at my kid's school. And so she agreed, and we started training, and we worked super, super hard. And here I am, EDS patient, supposed to be in a wheelchair. And I was able to cross my first finish line I ever crossed with Heather at our 5K. We were so emotional that they actually thought we got a phone call while we were out on the course. And on the way home that day, I kind of nudged Heather and I'm like, hey, how about a 10K? She's like, are you nuts? We barely finished that, but we would go on to finish a 10K. And from there, I would go on to finish my first half marathon with a valid handicap parking pass that I would wear, in memory of my dad and her mom. From there, I would go on to marathons, and I would get into long distance biking. This was my first 100-mile bike race that I did. And then I learned how to swim, and I got into triathlon a little bit. I've done a couple Ironman 70.3s. This was a real special day because all my coaches and the people I work with, they're like, you got to focus on the finish line all day. And I focused on the finish line, but it wasn't the same finish line everyone else focused on. My finish line was about 20 feet on the other side of everyone else's, and it was Heather. And the reason why that's so important to me is because for years, she had looked into my eyes with the most sympathetic look you can imagine. She felt so sorry for me. And this day, when our eyes met, she was just busting with pride to see me finish. This stuff is all cool. And the medals and the films and the paperwork, all that stuff is really cool. But what really matters to me is this walk I told you about. I was able to get back on the trail with my kids years later, only instead of picking me up in the car, they were actually my pacers and my crew for my first 50-mile ultra marathon. And again, I want to keep going back to, I was supposed to be in a wheelchair. This is a 50-mile race, and 50 miles is a long way to run. And I think that's so cool that they got to be a part of it. I told you Heather had to put my socks on me. Well, it would be years later I could return the favor because she was struggling to get her backpack on, and I was able to help her. Only this time we were 6,700 feet in the air because we just summited Mount Washington together. This is another, probably the coolest part of my journey. Is about 2 years after I went plant-based, Heather would go plant-based. She didn't do it for weight loss by any means. She did it for health, and she would end up shedding 90 pounds and turning into a competitive runner. And I still laugh because both of us, when we were in high school, the day we had to do that mile run for the military fitness thing, we would both skip school that day. We hated running. Our whole life has changed from this lifestyle. We act like 50-year-old kids. Never in my life did I think I'd be on a swing set with her. So that's the stuff that's super cool. Health-wise, my triglycerides in 2009 were 259. They're standing at about 274. My cholesterol was always over 300. It's actually 103 now. I need to update that. The cost of this, my insurance company used to spend almost 20 grand in 1 year for medicine. And then 15 and 16 combined, they spent $120. So I'm sure that we hear these facts, and I can't even keep up to date with these because they're so fast. But basically, 60% of the population right now is overweight or obese, and half of them are morbidly obese. It's way more than 3 trillion. dollars right now. 70% of everyone that's in America is on a drug, and half of them are on 2 or more. We have more heart disease, stroke, certain cancers, lung disease. All these are chronic diseases, and the CDC actually calls these lifestyle diseases. But here's the weird thing. We keep investing more and more money. Technology is advancing at an alarming rate, but we're just getting sicker and sicker and less mobile. Why is that happening? Personally, I think we need to stop looking for the cure and we need to start looking for the cause. And I believe that cause is right on our plate. Stereotypes, a lot of people think vegans are these very weak people and that we eat lawnmower clippings, but nothing could be further from the truth. Some of the most elite athletes on the planet are plant-based. And in fact, Patrick Boubounian is the strongest man in Germany, and he's been vegan for a decade. Our food is colorful, it's alive, it's delicious. It's beautiful. It's the farthest thing from lawnmower clippings I've ever seen. I came at this from a health perspective. What I've learned is it's great for the environment, great for the animals, and I've already touched a little bit on the economy. So where do you start? What do you do if you have no clue what to do? I look back at my journey, and what's wild is the best advantage I had was not knowing a whole bunch. It seems that we can get lost in all the information. We get drowned in it because it's at our fingertips. I wasn't into social media. I wasn't really into the internet that much. I just knew that I had a few certain things and I just kept repeating them. So I think if you're beginning, you're actually at a huge advantage. Keep it simple. And I mean really simple. I mean, my food choices 10 years ago were basically pizza, chicken wings, some kind of sandwiches, subs, hamburgers, and tacos. Like that's all I ate. I'd say that's pretty simple. And when I went plant-based, I kept that simplicity. You know, it was rice, beans, potatoes, veggies, and fresh fruit. And the more simple you keep this, the easier it is to find something that you like and repeat it. The other thing that I think helped me a lot, I didn't know how long I was going on this. I just thought it was like a 30-day thing. So all I did by default was focus on my next plate. I didn't think about 200 pounds later. I didn't think about 5Ks. I just thought about my next choice. And I think if you make your next choice your best choice, it doesn't get any easier than that. I just touched on this. Find a few dishes you like and repeat them. Start now. This is a huge hang up. It was for me, and I know it's for a lot of people I work with. There's always going to be something in the way of you starting. There's always Monday right around the corner. There's always the first, there's always New Year's. You can't do that. You're going to wait forever for the conditions to be right, and they're never going to be right. It doesn't matter what time it is. If you want to start this, start right now, this second. And this, to me, is super important because I know, especially through COVID, our group was at over 350 people, and we're down to about 6 people now, which is, I mean, it's devastating. But I try to look at what happened, and I'm sure it's not all because of COVID, and there's a lot of factors. But working with people, I try to pick out what makes them quit, and let's do the opposite. So first of all, staying motivated, setting goals. Just so you know, spoiler alert, don't follow these. The first thing that I thought was, stay motivated, set goals, collect resources, and finding a community. And these things on the surface sound fantastic. I mean, motivation is great. If you see a before and after photo, you hear an inspiring story, you're so motivated, right? Setting goals is great. That's a great thing. That got me a long ways. Getting resources, I learned a lot, and I couldn't find a community, so I made one. These all seem like really good things, right? But here's the problem. They end up in the long term looking back, they're very shallow and short term. I'm not saying you shouldn't use them, but I want to look at a little different aspect. When we talk about motivation, it feels good and it plays on our emotions. The problem is motivation comes and goes with your emotions. So the thing is, like, if you look at any other place in our life where we use motivation, it doesn't work. I wasn't real motivated to go into work this morning with a cold and I was tired. I wasn't motivated at all. But they don't care if I'm motivated. I have to be there. If I called my bank and told my mortgage company, look, I'm not feeling really motivated to pay my mortgage this month, I'm probably going to lose my home, right? Instead of motivation, what we really need to do is find responsibility. Look, if we know how to live a healthy lifestyle, I believe it becomes then our responsibility to live it. Because why would you want anything less for yourself or people around you? You're not just responsible for yourself, right? You're responsible for your loved ones too. So if I know that I need to push the Snickers bar away and get an apple, just because I'm not motivated doesn't really stop me, because I'm responsible to make the right choice. Goals are great. I love goals. I have a big goal right now. But when you get to your goals, sometimes people, I see this a lot with weight loss goals, they throw their hands up in the air, they don't know what to do. What do you do when you reach the goal? Instead of goals, the real magic that happens when you reach a goal are the habits that you build while you're reaching it. You're not going to get up one day and run 26 miles. You're not going to get up one day and meal prep for the whole year. It's just not going to happen. But every time you take that step and make that good choice over time will turn into a habit once it's repetitive. And the cool thing is, whether you have a goal on your plate or not, if your habit is every day to get out the door and take a walk, that's much more valuable than crossing the line of a 5K. Resources are great. I see more people collecting resources, and they never do anything with them. They just sit on a pile of resources. We can use the resources for a great excuse. You can read a book every week for the whole year, and if you never apply it, it's useless. The other thing about resources, there are people out there that need help. Instead of continuing to over-collect resources, we need to start being a resource to our community. So we need to give these resources. Take what you know and pass it along so we can spread this message. And lastly, this was a rough one for me. Community means so much, especially as an addict. AA is like the benchmark for community. And I learned really quickly that community, as soon as COVID hit, I had to do something different, because every month you go to these meetups, whether it's a Zoom call, or whatever, that's great. But the thing is, sometimes we put so much weight into the community that we forget that we need to be accountable for ourselves. Community is great. We need to get as much as we can. It helps us know we're not in this alone. It helps us get new ideas. It's a place where we can give those resources. But while we're doing that, we got to make sure that we're accountable to the person in the mirror, whether the community's there or not, whether we got to go to the meetup next month and have someone notice that we put on a couple pounds. So accountability, I think, is super, super important. So really quickly, take responsibility. Build good habits, help others, and become accountable. I think these are the 4 key points that can keep us in the game. These are long-lasting and sustainable. And if you want to reach out to me, you can find me anywhere, pretty much fatmanrants.com. We have a lovely Facebook group called Getting Healthy Together. We're always doing challenges and stuff in there. And if you'd like a free PDF copy of my book, You can go right to my website and download a free PDF copy. I think we have a couple cases left. But yeah, that's my cookbook, and that's kind of a funny story, but we could save that for another time. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching.
It was wonderful, Tim. One of the things I would like for you to mention when you talk about being responsible and creating a community and helping others, you, in the middle of all of this, with everything else that you and Heather were doing, you opened a restaurant. Yes, I know.
Oh,
I hear
yeah.
wonderful things about it. So you kind of cover all four of those bases in that restaurant. It developed a community. You are accountable for the people that show up. You're promoting, you're giving, helping other people create habits. So share a little bit about that.
Oh, well, I will share this. Don't ever get into the food industry. I don't know if you know this, but we didn't, our goal was not to start a restaurant. That was not the goal at all. I'm a teacher, so I had been using our district as community ed class. We do these community ed classes. I don't know if they do it in Florida. But basically there's like adult learning, there's like after class, and it can be any, like whatever. So we came up with a 6-week program, a plant-based program. And I teach engineering, so I do a lot of lecturing. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring people in. I'm going to lecture at them for 6 weeks. They're all going to go plant-based and life is going to be good. Wow. All they kept asking about is food. And I'm like, why do you guys care about food? I'm telling you, this is the science. So that class evolved more into a cooking class. So we would lecture for a little bit and then we'd cook. And I would do stuff, okay, dice the onion. They're like, how do you dice an onion? So we ended up putting stations so they could get involved and they could practice. Long story short, we'd go through the 6 week. On the 6th week, we would cook for them every week. On the 6th week, they would all cook for us. The new class would start a few weeks later and all the old people from the class would show back up. And I'm like, what are you guys doing here? Like, we already did this. Like, am I a terrible teacher? They said, well, we just like the community and we like cooking together. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's when we started. We got like a pod, like a Plant Pure pod. And we started, a church let us use their big conference room. And so we started like funneling people over there. That group actually got really big. It was in Forks Over Knives. It was so big. We put our first picnic. We invited everyone over to our backyard to have a plant-based picnic, bring a dish. It was our first time. And 90 some people showed up.
My word.
We fit them all on our back porches too. It was great. My mom came over and she goes, who are these people? I'm like, I have no clue. There was like a mile of cars. It was great. But so what happened is we wanted to give that same thing to our community, but we wanted to do it for free. The school district was charging them. So we wanted to do it for free. So we leased this building and we made it the community room. And I was teaching every Thursday. I would do like an air fryer class, Instapot class, dressing class, oil-free dressing. And then Heather had a little cafe out there where she was selling like locally roasted coffee. We were making some hummus, and we had a burger company where we were selling frozen burgers, plant-based burger company. So COVID hits and the health department says, you're done, shut it down. And I'm like, well, we do sell stuff out front. We have a cooler. Can we be a grocery store? So they're like, yeah, then you're essential. Okay. So we stocked some nutritional yeast and stuff. And I'm sorry, I'm going way too long on this. But what happened was a lot of people lost their jobs in the food industry. Like, they found out the next day they weren't working. Unemployment had this huge lag and people were hungry. Like, some of the people were not making a lot of money working at these restaurants. So I was just talking to people outside and I said, you know what, Heather, let's order 2 rice steamers. We made these things called Good Neighbor meals. And we just made it. I mean, rice and beans and stuff, when you have a restaurant card, like, it's super cheap. So we're just Instapotting all this food. And we put a post out and said, come to this place, grab you can grab 3 meals, but you have to give 2 away to someone that needs them, because we didn't want to distribute them. People started coming. People really appreciated them. And we got really good at making meal prep. So we kind of changed gears. We got a little more savvy with it, did some more research. And I think the first 2 years we did that, we served over 40,000 meals out of just me and Heather. And I have a full-time job. She had a pretty good-sized commercial cleaning company. We were just too busy. But so that's how the restaurant started. But we do have a full library. Almost any book that's out there on plant-based, we lend out DVDs. We have a whole bunch of resources, and we need to get back to classes. We're just gonna have to get a new building though.
Well,
That's where that came from.
You're just one of those people that you don't talk the talk, you walk the walk. And you help a lot of people. You really do. You really
Yeah,
do.
or I make really bad decisions, because I'll tell you what, the food industry it's brutal.
Crazy, I'm sure.
Everything is so heavy. And we cook everything from scratch. Like when we make potatoes, we bring 90 pounds of sweet potatoes in. We scrub each one of them. I mean, it's hard.
A labor of love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So Tim, I have a question for you, and this is related to your EDS, your running, and truly you have inspired us all. But when did the pain in your arms go and your shoulders go away? When did the pain in your running go away for all of those people who want to start walking and running? Kind of walk us through that, because you've gotten off a lot of pain medication. You got off a lot of alcohol, and you're just, a poster child for plant-based living. But how did that work for you?
Oh, that's a terrible question.
No.
So sorry, I'm just being honest. So when I first started, no pain at all. I felt great. Because you got to remember too, you're 400 pounds, you lose half your body weight. I mean, you feel like a feather, really. And your body is amazing at adapting, right? It's amazing. Like now, like if I put 200 pounds on my back and did a squat, I don't know if I could do it anymore. But back then, like I didn't feel I was strong, but I had to be strong to lift 400 pounds. So my pain was predominantly caused by inflammation, which is a good thing for everyone, because whether it's multiple sclerosis, there's so many chronic diseases that are inflammatory. So if you're, whatever your disease is or your chronic sick, like you can't hurt yourself going plant-based, because to me, it might get rid of stuff you don't even know you have. So the pain went away fairly quickly, because the inflammation went away. Now, I'm no spring chicken anymore. And I'm just going to be honest with you. Life was going, and the EDS life was going great. I was super fit, super fast, actually. I was actually on a couple podiums, and I don't consider myself an athlete. And about 2 years ago, actually 5 years ago, I had to get my ankle rebuilt. So a lot of this damage, I don't think it's fair to count it, because it was done with all that weight for all those years. My bones were actually crumbling to the point that you could feel them trying to come out my skin like little crumples. So they tried to rebuild my ankle, and it was a pretty intense surgery. The surgery failed. I tried to limp around for about 3 years on it, and then I went to another doctor. He said, yeah, you have 2 options. The first option is we need to do an amputation. And I think he did that on purpose to set me up for the second option. I'm like, man, I'm not interested in that. So I had a total fusion on that side. So basically they cut 4 inches of my fibula out. They cut my talus, my tibia flat, bolted everything together. And so now I technically don't have a hinge on my ankle. But what's interesting about that, I competed at Ironman Lake Placid just 13 months after that. And I walked full marathon shortly after that. And the recovery time is 18 months. So I heal really quick because of my diet. And I don't get inflammation. And again, for the healing process, the inflammation is what stops the blood flow from those slow flow tendons and ligaments. They don't get a lot of blood flow. I also had a nasty spine surgery. I had like 30 staples going up my spine. They removed 4 bones. So I've been through hell the last 2 years, to be honest with you. And just 3 weeks ago, they had to reattach a muscle to a bone, and they had to relocate a nerve. So I'm actually, I just got another fresh one there. But you know what? If I wasn't eating like this, I wouldn't be able to move. I'd be in so much pain. So I'm super grateful. But to tell you that I'm not in pain anymore, my arm hurts right now.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
but you just had surgery, so you can account for that.
But for a normal person, because I work with a lot of people, and I'm telling you, we just ran someone through a program. It's literally day 7. They said, I cannot believe how I feel. Like 7 days. And these are people that are older. It's amazing that switch when you start eating anti-inflammatory foods.
Yeah. And I'm saying this for all of the people who may be couch potatoes right now, and, they get out and they walk maybe once or twice a week, but, you emphasize the consistency on a daily basis that
Sure.
you try to get out and walk. So I think that's important. So do you want to elaborate on maybe where you started? You went 3/4 of a mile and your kids had to pick you up, but what did you do the next day?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Debbie. Consistency is king, whether in any aspect of life, really. Well, whether it's relationship, finance, whatever it is. We live in a society that we think instead of eating an apple a day, we can just have 7 on Sunday and do whatever we want through the week. And I think it's almost as I get older, I look back and it's almost not about the thing we do. It's about for example, it's not about the miles you walk every day. It's about putting your shoes on and getting out the door, because everything kind of gets easy after that. But this is kind of deep, but I want to kind of flip this around because plant-based lifestyle is great, 100% optimal. But one thing that I learned that I used to not talk about is a plant-based lifestyle doesn't make you invincible. It doesn't make you live forever. And I used to hide from that because I didn't want to tell people that. But the reality is, I think when we know that, when we learn that, life is precious, right? And plants aren't going to solve all your problems in life. And if we understand that we live differently, right? We enjoy that walk. It's not about exercise or training. It's about, I get to go for a walk today. And there's thousands of people that don't get to enjoy that privilege. It's such a gift. And I laid in this room, with tubes hooked up to my leg. And I thought, man, all the times I thought I was grateful about going for a walk, I didn't know. So to know that life is vulnerable, life is precious, and life is impermanent, I think is such a positive thing, because every day we should get out and go for that walk. Not because we should, because we're consistent, because it's on our calendar, because we get to do that. And there's going to be a day we can't. And we need to take advantage of when we can. And even if you don't want to, do it for someone that's sitting in a hospital right now.
Good point.
Yeah,
what is it that you and Heather say about all you got to do is a little more than you did yesterday? I'm probably not saying it right, but
yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. That was my goal. It doesn't, and I think that works for anyone, right? If you just do a little more than you did yesterday, and it doesn't have to be in the same realm. If I get to 50 miles, I can't, and it's not just that. The point is, you're always trying to better yourself, whether it's learn something new, do something new, try a new vegetable. I can't believe how many different kinds of fruits and vegetables out there. I did a challenge one time to eat a new fruit or vegetable every day for 30 days. And you could probably go 3 months doing that, really.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any more questions in here. You covered so much. I don't think anybody has any questions.
I'm sorry, I talk too much.
You're great. That's why we wanted you here, because you do inspire. And I love your four things instead of motivation, goals, resources, and community. It's true. You can have all of those things, but if you don't follow through with them and do something with them, and like you said, when COVID hit and community was not that possible, you got to do something. So
yeah, it threw a lot of people. It threw me off. I think it throws you off because you lose. And so, you got to do some digging to find out, like, why are you doing this just to impress a community, or are you doing this because it's the right thing to do, right?
Well, Tim, we have kept you longer than we promised. So I know Kathy has some things to follow up with, but Kathy, I think we can let Tim go, right? Everything else is just our cleanup for Chat and Show. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, and I apologize for going over it.
You know what? Kathy and I had talked about it. We knew you would. So
all right. Thank
and
you for having me.
Appreciate you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So the last thing that we wanted to do was to share with you that Tim is already on our YouTube page. This will be on there too, but his first visit from 2019 is on there. And I don't know if you want to, but that QR code will take you directly to his YouTube channel. And it starts right where Heather talks. So if you want to look at what Heather went through, you can take a look there. Or you can just Google Chat and Shoe More Plants YouTube and look under the playlist Chat and Shoe meetings, and he's one of the ones in that long list. But if you hold your phone up there, you can get your phone to take a picture of the QR code and send you there. And then the last thing we want to tell you is that we do have our next Zoom planned, and Eventbrite is already up there. In fact, some people have already started registering, and I just put it up at about 5 o'clock. But this is going to be Dr. Dulaney, and she's going to talk about diabetes and heart disease. And it's a really powerful presentation. And then we'll also be able to ask questions. Nobody understands diabetes and cardiology and heart disease like Dr. Dulaney, I don't think, because of her own personal history with family that had diabetes and heart disease.